Hello, I am Michael. I'm a small business owner. I am an entrepreneur, improv artist, speaker, and always neurotic. Definitely neurotic. I'm a TV host and your host for what we call the Second Scene podcast. It is a Dweebs global production where we give people free mentorship help. We do everything from resume writing to mental health. It's dweebsglobal.org, completely confidential and completely free. So I'm here today with Simon Kardynal. Simon was in the Canadian Armed Forces for 26 years. While in the Armed Forces, he was able to take many leadership courses, including the Master of Arts in Leadership from the Royal Roads University. After retiring in January of 2021, he took a job as a contractor, which has allowed him to use the skills he learned in the Canadian Armed Forces and from these leadership courses to really follow his true passions. So we will hear about those soon, but thank you. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate that. I'm excited to be able to talk.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to start with the Armed Forces and what made you decide to get into the Armed Forces.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I was in the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm a Canadian. A boot. Fun fact, no one in Canada says a boot. We all say about. I've never met anyone who says a boot, but that's a sidebar. So what made me join the forces? You know what? It was really just that little bit of that call to want to help people out. There was a bit of that, but on my dad's side, I was fifth generation, and on the other side, my mother's side, it was third generation military. And it was always just something I saw. My dad was in the military. I grew up in that environment, and it's all I ever really knew. But more to that, as I was growing up, I really saw that what the forces was doing was able to help people and really make a real difference with their lives, not just collect a paycheck. And there's nothing wrong with that. I felt that call, and that was always stuck with me. And I knew right from day one that that's what I wanted to do. I was very fortunate because I know many, many people that takes them a long time to get that calling and to understand what it is. So that's how I got there.
I was in your family. It's what you saw. It's what you looked up to.
Exactly.
This is kind of a crazy, weird question. What do the Canadian Armed Forces do? Like, what is there? Because you never think of Canada as a place that's going to be attacked or do an attack. And I guess that they join, I guess they do go to the front lines with the United States with some of their allies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, we have a very similar military structure as the U.S. military and a lot of the NATO allies. So we have an Air Force, an Army, and a Navy. And so in our case, we have a Royal Canadian Air Force because we have an attachment and affiliation with the Commonwealth. We have a Royal Canadian Navy, and we have a Canadian Army. And so when I joined, I started in the Canadian Army in an infantry regiment called the Royal Canadian Regiment. I don't want to brag. It's obviously the best regiment in Canada, clearly.
We're gonna check that.
Okay, good call. It's all over the internet, and the internet never lies to you. So, and so I did that for 5 years, and I loved that because when I joined the military, I was just barely 19 years old. I was young. I thought I knew everything. I really thought I was the man. And joining the infantry, it sounds like a lot of fun. You go, you blow stuff up, you shoot guns, you get the idea, you do all that kind of cool, fun stuff. But eventually, very quickly, people tend to start breaking down because it's hard on the body. And in the Canadian military, we have an air force, so we do all the same stuff that the U.S. military do. We go on deployments and we go on giant exercises, and because of the proximity of Canada to the United States, we do a lot of joint exercises. You had mentioned earlier that when we go away, we do something quite often. We do it with the Americans, and that's absolutely true. The last time I heard, the American military total force was hovering around 1.4 million people, and the Canadian military has around 67,000. So, we just don't have the force, the size of a force to go anywhere by ourselves. Probably another really fun fact, the U.S. Navy has more fighter jets, more F-18s on one aircraft carrier than we have in our entire arsenal. So, and not by like one or two planes, we're talking about a couple of dozen. So you get the idea, right? Like,
it is a bit like I imagine then. It's not, it is very small.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's not a huge force by any stretch of the imagination, especially when you consider the size of the country. America's got around 400 million people. We've got 37 million, so roughly 10 times the size. And then our country geographically is larger than the United States. So it's it's a challenge, you know, and when we go away in the international stage, we quite often have to operate with our allies, and we're very good at what we do, and we're renowned throughout the world for being very professional and being very solid tacticians. But we quite often rely on our neighbors to help us, you know, achieve a global operational perspective.
Right, right. So you were in the armed forces for 26 years. Is it like our armed forces where it allowed you to go to school and it gave you a lot of other um, benefits?
Yeah. So the way it works is you join the military, and then you go off, do basic training, of course. And then as you progress up the rank structure, you get training to learn how to do the rank that you're at, start being a leader, become better technically, proficient, whatever you need it to be. And then you go from there. And then as you move a little further up in the ranks, the system is trying to spread your wings and help the member see more, you know, see some systems thinking if you want to get into that. And then they have different programs that allow other avenues for education. For myself, what happened was I got to around the 24-year mark, and the system had a program where they would cover the majority of the cost of a university degree. I just had to go do it on my own time and stuff, which I'm not complaining. The degree was paid for. And that was what led to the Master of Arts in Leadership at Royal Roads, which is a civilian university.
Since you were in the best regiment, right? Regiment?
No, that's true. Yeah, regiment, exactly.
Okay. Since you were in the best one, what did the best one spend its time doing?
So it's an excellent question. So when I was there, it was way back in the early 90s. So I joined in 1994. Back then, the Canadian military was not, how do I word this? You know what? It was 25 years later. We were not being supported by the government. I'm okay with saying that. You know, we saw a 25% reduction in operating budget. You get those types of things. So we didn't do a whole lot starting in 1994. We were going away on some tours, and there was, you know, Bosnia was taking place. That was just starting to ramp up for us. So we were starting to expand on that, and that was getting very big. But as far as other things, we were really focused on NATO missions and those types of things. What I did on a day-to-day basis was train officers and train non-commissioned officers to do with their leadership courses. Quite often I was involved in the training programs.
Okay. How did it allow you to help people? I know you said you got into it because you really wanted to.
That's an excellent question, but I think the way I'm going to reword that is, so how I was able to help people was when I first got in, you know, Canada, we had a couple of natural disasters happen. The Quebec and Ontario ice storms, where we saw, you know, close to a foot of ice just all of a sudden appear all over the country, over the Ontario, Quebec region and whatnot. We had to, you know, send in me and with all my regiment and stuff to go and help people out. So on a domestic aspect, I was able to go in and make sure people were safe and help take care of people like that. Right. And since then, we've seen all kinds of things with, you know, firefighters and all those types of domestic requirements that the military will go in to do. Myself, I've been involved in Swiss. There was an aircraft crash called Swiss Air Flight 111 in Peggy's Cove in 97 or 98. I'm having a bit of a brain fart. Bear with me.
I could never say a specific year.
Exactly right.
Happened, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, good. So no judgment.
No.
Excellent. Yeah. So, you know, I ended up having to go be part of the quick reaction force to be involved in the what was started off as a rescue, but became pretty clear it was a recovery operation, to go and, you know, respect the remains of the people that were perished on the aircraft and collect personal items and those types of things. So not fun by any stretch of the imagination, but looking back, you know, I was able to do my part to help people in whatever way I could.
Right. I got you. You know, you caught my ear with the ice storm. We don't have those. Is that literally, instead of snow, you're getting a foot of ice? How does that even?
Pretty much. So what happens is where the weather region is, quite often what we'll get around the December, January time frame, it starts off as snow, and then it gets just the perfect temperature of warm, like around -3, -4 Celsius, which I think is like 30 Fahrenheit ish. And then it basically starts to rain, and then it's still winter. So then the rain hits whatever is colder than it, and then it freezes, and it just builds and builds and builds. Normally it lasts for a few hours, and then it gets cold again and everything just kind of falls off. But Not this time. This time it lasted for days. And, we showed up in Quebec when we got the call out to go try and start helping people out. And in Quebec, all the main power towers or the power lines are above ground. And as we're driving down the highway in this crappy old school bus, we're looking, and each of the towers just got covered in ice and they got toppled over. And each one just looked at it just for kilometers, just topple. So there was no power. Paramedics and the fire services couldn't get anywhere because it was just, the roads were just frozen and stuff. So we ended up being out there for almost a month, actually. And there was things like going door to door just to make sure people had food and water. And if they weren't being safe, taking them out of the house because it wasn't a safe environment, that type of stuff. So, yeah.
Gotcha. I couldn't imagine. We shut down with like 2 inches of snow in Washington, D.C. So,
no, that's a normal winter day here.
Yeah. No, my work commute is an hour, and I think we got like 1.5 inches one day all of a sudden, and we weren't expecting it. It took me 10 hours to get home.
Holy wow!
That's how bad the area is at handling it.
Wow, that's insane. Well, out on the West Coast in British Columbia, that's very much what it's like. You can drive your motorcycle 11 months of the year out there. I'm in the eastern area, and last year I think they said they got something like 380 centimeters, which is I don't even know what the thing is. It's like a foot of snow. It's crazy, and that's an average winter now. Whatever.
Got you. All right, so you took classes at the Master of Arts you took the Master of Arts Leadership at the Royal Roads University. People in America aren't going to know what the Royal Roads University is.
Oh, okay. I can give a little blurb about that if you prefer.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So Royal Roads University, it actually started out as in Canada, we had three military colleges, kind of like West Point, or what are the other ones you guys have? I forget. You get the idea. West Point, that type of thing. And so we had 3 of them. And then due to the budget cuts in the mid 90s, what happened was Royal Roads just was on the chopping block and it got closed down. So a bunch of people got together and they created Royal Roads University, the civilian university. So, and it's out in the West Coast in British Columbia, in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. It is one of the most idyllic places you could imagine. If anyone has seen any of the X-Men movies or the Deadpool movies, if you know the castle that Deadpool is around, that's actually on the campus. That's in Royal Roads. So check it up. It's just amazing. So, and then they offered all kinds of different programs and whatnot. And I was able to get into the Master of Arts in Leadership program, not because I have an undergrad degree, which I don't, but what they do is they actually look at a person's whole professional and personal life background. And then a board sits after you write an essay and a resume and that type of a thing. And they will say, yeah, right on, this person or this has or does not have the aptitude and the acumen to go ahead in this program. And then you get accepted. And I got accepted. I did have to do an advanced writing course because my writing wasn't quite up to university par yet, but I did that and away we went. And here we are.
Okay, nice. So you did that at what age did you go back to school and do that?
I started that when I was 44.
That's It's impressive.
I'll be honest, I was freaking out, and there were so many reasons why. And it was actually one of the main reasons why I ended up retiring from the military. So, but I'll tell you about that if that's okay.
Please, yeah.
So I was 44, and I'll be honest, what I was looking at was I was in the military. I was doing very well. I was what's the rank called a Master Warrant Officer, which is pretty high up in the non-commissioned officer rank structure. And all I was really looking for was to get those post-nominals, the MA at the end of my name, because I knew that was going to help me do better in my career by being able to go forward, right? That was kind of the goal, the focus. It was a very practical requirement. And so when I applied for the program, that's what I was looking towards. And then I got in and I started the coursing. And in my cohort of 38 people, I ended up being the only military person. And that was one of the many really pivotal moments in this, because all of a sudden I was having to learn and talk about these different leadership aspects that, in the normal world, I would either probably just make fun of them with my other military buddies, or we would just sit there and talk. And you know how it is in different groups, especially in different professions, you all kind of talk the same way and you kind of think the same way and you do your own different thing. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't have that person to sit back and kind of talk about or whatnot. I had to figure this out. So I had a choice to make. I could either choose to sit back and not do that and just kind of not really put the effort in, or I could open my mind to what this course was offering me. And so I chose option B, and I am really, really happy I did that, because it just was a transformative moment for me, in that it really helped me see that the leadership principles I had learned in the military through my leadership courses with the military, that they were valid. And then it was teaching me some other stuff that was not generally military, if you want to word it that way. It was things like, I can lead with my heart. You can imagine in the military, it tends to be a very macho, very, very gruff type of thing in general, of course. But, all of a sudden I'm having these instructors say to me, well, Simon, that's an interesting concept you're talking about there, but what did your heart tell you in that moment when you were reaming out that young private? I don't care what my heart was telling me. I was freaking out on that kid, and then they said, well, no, it's very good to think about this. I'd like to offer, I don't know how many times I heard, I'd like to offer that you consider this. And at first I was like, wow, this is you just trying to wordsmith me. But I realized, no, they're just trying to help me see something from a different perspective. And so the other thing that the program really gave me was that I learned that I can be a really good, strong leader with my brain and with my heart if I tie the two of them together. They can't work separately of each other. You can't always lead with your heart, and you can't always lead with your brain. Mm-hmm. But if you put them together, you can be a much more effective, caring, compassionate, stern leader, if that's the requirement, right? And
the armed forces almost beat the emotion out of you, and then they had to beat it back into you.
Oh, exactly. And that's exactly it. My writing was, what was the term I got? One of my first essays, she said, Simon, you got the content, no problem, but this is so sterile, I could read this in an operating room. I was like, oh, I think that's good. So
it was like a matter of fact.
Oh, very much so. It was like writing a briefing note, because that's just what I did, right? And that's all I knew. And so I tell you, if I were to show you an essay when I started the program versus when I finished the program, I went back and read them, and I don't know, it wouldn't look like it was the same person. Yeah. It was amazing.
Did it change you outside of the classes and outside of the armed forces?
Oh, very much so. Because one of the things they talked about was the need to understand your heart, mind, body, and soul in conjunction with everything else that you're doing. So when I was getting ready to go and do all this, and I really started to embrace the program, I came back from this 2-week residential portion, and the military gives us time, about an hour and a half a day, to go do PT or physical training and whatnot. And I'm at a rank level at the time where I was an administrator. I was really kind of my own boss. So, you know how it is. You get busy. I'll go later. I'll go tomorrow. And then it's 6 years later. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It all happens to everyone. Right.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take this time and see how this works. So I did. I made a point of going, and I started running. It turns out that I'm actually a pretty good runner, and I was going to the gym very, very steadily. And I lost like 65 pounds, and I didn't even know I did it, because that wasn't the motivation to go and do that. It wasn't any magic pill. I just ate better. I ate less, and I exercised more. And over the course of about 9 months, I lost the weight, and that was fine. And I've been able to keep it off, because now I understand that physical level helps me make clearer thoughts, which in turn helps me understand to listen to my heart a little more. So it's this really great circle of understanding how it all comes together.
Okay. Yeah. So it wasn't the Master of Arts and Leadership. So that's not the course. That's like the whole.
That's the whole program.
That's the whole program. So writing was part of it. I guess speaking was part of it.
Yeah, exactly. So in the program, there was a lot of talking about how to understand yourself as a leader, how to understand the different styles of leadership, how to understand, how to be a good follower so that you can make yourself a good leader, and those different types of things. What was interesting about that was we weren't talking about kind of generic stuff. We were really speaking to systems thinking and creative tension and how to understand why system thinking is so important. When does it begin? And all of these different types of little programs that all mattered, which ultimately ended up helping us decide what type of program we would end up doing at the end of the master's program. And so students have two options. You can either write a thesis paper, and then, that's like a standard thesis where you write the paper and you defend it and you go from there. but the school also has a portion of the program called the Engaged Leadership Project. And it's just like the name implies, it's a little project. So you come up with a topic that you're going to choose. And in my case, I had really discovered that the Canadian Forces was actually quite bad at supporting non-commissioned members and giving them any type of secondary education that didn't directly relate to their particular trade in the military. And so I ended up writing my thesis or my ELP about that.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, you
weren't
like
afraid
of
of
a question there.
You weren't afraid of pissing anyone off, saying that they weren't
You know what? I was so upset that when I clued into that, at first I was, and then the more I thought about the topic, the more upset I got. And about that time, it was around that time that I kind of realized that I didn't think that I could really keep going in the military. Might be time for me to go and try and do something else. So I think that also played into it. It's like, well, I know I'm leaving, so I can be as vocal as I want to be. And actually to continue forward after that, the program, knowing what I knew now about the lack of support, and it's only gotten worse, by the way, it's a whole other side story.
Gotcha. It's a shame.
It's very frustrating to me. It makes me really mad. I found that now that I'm out, I can actually be that loud vocal voice because I don't need to worry about the rank structure. I don't need to say, I have to be polite, of course, otherwise no one's going to listen to me, but I don't have to worry about the politics of being inside the military. I don't have to worry about hurting my career because someone's not going to like what I say, because I can do this. And I've actually going to be a part of the International Society of Military Sciences. I'm waiting to find out this week. And I'm able to now talk at the international level about this, and hopefully, help other NCMs, especially in the Canadian military, get a better program for them so that they can experience what I experienced. I'll give you an example really quick.
Okay.
The program that I did, that Master of Arts in Leadership, is no longer, and the military paid for it, is no longer going to be paid for by the military, even though I was what was considered a senior non-commissioned officer or senior non-commissioned member in a systemic leadership role. They were not going, or an institutional systemic leadership role. They were not going to fund that anymore because it didn't relate to my trade, which was crazy. So anyways, it's a sidebar.
Right. So it sounds like they're not giving good support to their, it's going to stop people from wanting to go to the military, wanting to go to the Air Forces. If they're not supporting what they're going to be doing afterwards.
I think so. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's a lot of really amazing things about the forces, and I'm not trying to suggest that people shouldn't join, but I am certainly saying that it's not a perfect system and that things need to change, because I feel, and I was able to prove it to a certain extent, that the system still considers itself more like it's in the 60s and 70s, when NCOs most of the time didn't even have high school. And now it's quite common to see people with degrees and even graduate degrees in their senior NCOs. So it makes a big difference. So just needs to get caught up with the times.
Gotcha. Well, with the leadership program, what's one or two key things that you can share with us and the listeners that you took away from it that have been huge helps?
Oh yeah, for sure. So the one is in a practical sense, in that I think we talked about it earlier, that passion is important. I came into this program with just a very practical desire to have that MA at the end of my name. And then I realized that leading without passion, it limits a person's ability to see the big picture. If you're just doing it to do it, I get it. Sometimes that has to happen. Sometimes you just got to put your blinders on and drive forward. But if you're in charge and you don't have that passion to be in charge, it will limit your ability to take care of your people, which should be, I believe, everyone's top priority, and then worry about what the company's directives are. And that passion limits you. Without that, lack of passion limits you.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
And I would say that the second thing, and it kind of leads into the podcast that I had started, was as soon as you start becoming a leader, there's 1,000 gajillion books out there. The internet has got information everywhere.
So many.
Start learning about it. Don't wait until you're all of a sudden the senior team lead to understand how to be a senior team leader. The information is there. It's available. Go figure it out, because as emerging leaders, if you're a leader and you haven't considered that, you're already behind, and your team will see that 100% of the time. They will notice when you're not ready. I guarantee it.
What's the biggest difference with you being a leader currently to when you were a leader in the military? What's the biggest difference?
That's a great question. If I could, I've got two little things with that. The first one is, if you remember earlier, I was talking about the sterility of my essays and stuff. One of the things my work recognized with me when I was in the military was I carry that exact same ideology over when I did work emails. As far as I'm concerned, an email is a work tool. And so it's not, hey, how's it going today? How was your weekend? I hope your flowers are blooming. It was, good day. I need this. Have a good day. Send. And so now,
Cold.
oh yeah, exactly. Right. And now the role, I work for a company called Callian, and I'm a contract manager. So it's very much an administrator role. I like what I like what I do. I like the job. The people are fantastic, but I was doing the exact same thing. And I would be sending out these emails. Hi, I need this by this date. Make sure it happens. And I wouldn't even be saying I need this by this date. I require this by COB, close of business, NLT, no later than Tuesday, 3 July 2021, period. And then not even a good day. It's just my signature block, and away it would go. And not even giving it a second thought, because in my head, I said, have a good day at the end of the email. So I've softened the blow.
That did it.
Yeah, that's it. I'm good. Facile, right?
Right.
And unbeknownst to me, I'm getting, people are circulating emails in the background saying, what is Simon's problem? Like, he seems so friendly when we chat to him, but he sends these emails. He's upset all the time. And no, I'm not. It's just that was all I was used to. So
right.
There's a huge difference in just understanding the corporate world versus the military chain of command and the structures and whatnot. So that was a pretty big one. So
yeah, one of my landlords will send me emails, and it'll be like, if you were late on rent, then you will be, it'll be one strike, blah, 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 like so formal. I've never been late on rent, never done anything. And it's like, it sounds so threatening, because there's literally no like, hey, how are you? Happy you're my tenant, thanks for paying rent on time. It's just literally like, it's like a threat. Like, yeah,
exactly.
I imagine like it would piss off like your coworkers and stuff. Cause I know like that stuff would make it hits you when you get an email that just seems so unfriendly.
Oh, very much so. And so I have learned to tone things down and take my time. And part of it is because I just get my automatic email machine gun out there, and I'm blasting out emails all the time. And that was actually the thing that reminded me, okay, if you're using this as your main form of communication, you need to, and I'm saying this to myself, you need to understand that that's your main form of communication. You're having a conversation. How would you do that in the real life? So yes, it takes longer, but again, it's much like learning, reading a book about self-help, or, when I go for a run, it's time invested. It's not time wasted. Whereas before I saw that as time wasted.
Gotcha. Yeah. Do you write it real cold and then just go back, throw an emoji in?
Oh yeah. I use the smiley emoji. It's candy.
You're also a pilot, I guess. Well, you were in the armed forces, but I guess you fly for a hobby now, or you fly for...
Yeah, that's correct. So back when I was living in Cold Lake, Alberta, which is northern Alberta, and it's just like the name implies, it's a very cold giant lake up in northern Alberta. There's not much to do. I don't hunt. I don't fish. I didn't have an ATV or a snowmobile, so I didn't know what else I was going to do. So I decided to spend $16,000 and get my private pilot's license. So I started that, and that had always been a passion of mine. And, I wanted to be able to keep doing that. And then not unfortunately, the reality is life kicks in. My daughter is starting to grow up, life, kids, it just happens. Right. And then all of a sudden I've got no money and I've got no time. And it went to the wayside. But when I started this program, this Master of Arts in Leadership program, it made me realize that I also need to take the time for me and not just worry about work and focus on the passions. And so because of that, I got back into running, and I went and I bought a motorcycle because I can. And then once I had the opportunity to be able to afford the flying, now I've gotten back into that, and I've got a couple of flights, and I'm doing okay. It's the reminder areas. So it's good, but I just love it. There's nothing quite like getting up at about 6,000 feet AGL and looking around, and it's just you and the airplane droning away. It's fantastic. I love it.
I have a few friends that just recently got their pilot's license, and I can't do it.
I totally get it. If it helps, I wouldn't say I have a crushing fear of heights, but I definitely have a respect for being on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's just like anything. You just get in and do it. I can't imagine throwing myself out of a perfectly good aircraft. So
Yes, see, I've done that a few times. I've gone parachuting, but I had the parachute on. Like, okay, the airplane doesn't have no parachute.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine. I can't even wrap my mind around. Okay, you want me to get out of the airplane that's working fine? That's crazy.
It's funny. We all view things slightly different.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you're also starting a podcast called Trench Leadership.
That's correct. Yes.
Right. What's the?
No, you go. I cut you off.
No, I was going to ask what you were about to answer. What's your overall idea for the podcast?
Okay, yeah, for sure. And thanks for that. I appreciate you letting me talk about the podcast a bit. It happens to be that it's called Trench Leadership, a podcast from the front. And again, like everything over the last couple of years, this went back to my Master of Arts in Leadership program, the degree program. And once I realized, okay, maybe I'm going to do something else other than the military. And if I'm going to follow things, I knew I still needed for myself to give back somehow. And I didn't know what that was going to be or how I was going to keep doing that. How could I follow this passion, this love of education that I discovered? How could I keep doing that forward in a realistic sense? Because a very large fear that I think most people have when they get to the end of a large education program is, what do I do with this now? What do I do with this crazy amount of books that I just read? So I bounced around a little bit, and it was around that time I started listening to leadership podcasts. And I happened to notice that, in my view, I saw there tended to be three types of leadership podcast genres. The first one tends to be C-suiters, so CEOs, CFOs, COOs, whatever, you get the idea. Mm-hmm. And they're in there and they're talking about, how they were in my episode 00. I used the joke about the Nakatomi Corporation. If anyone who's around my age, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And how they led the Nakatomi Corporation doing forward. Watch Die Hard, and then
okay.
Yeah, there you go.
That worked.
and then and how they were leading tens of thousands of people, and this is how you can be a leader. Well, great. That doesn't talk to a new leader. That doesn't talk to an emerging leader or someone who's a team leader or even a middle management at the point where I'm at. And then I noticed there tends to be a whole bunch of faith-based leadership podcasts. And again, I'm not saying anything negative about anyone. Let's be clear about that. But I found it tended to be a lot of pastors, and they were saying that, with faith and with belief, you can be a great leader. And again, I'm not saying I disagree with that, but it's a very niche group, and it still doesn't talk specifically to emerging leaders. And then the other third group was kind of a mishmash of super niche groups. People who have clear iPhone cases with a big apple on the back, and they happen to have a blue shirt with white stripes on it. It's like super, super niche. And again, now that's too specific. So I said, wow, I should. And then the other thing that happened to me was wow, I really wish I had learned about this. And I kept hearing that as I was going through my program and as I was getting senior leadership training programs in the military. I remember thinking to myself, as I was learning about systems thinking as a brand new Master Warrant Officer, thinking, I sure wish I had heard about this when I was a Master Corporal, which is in the Canadian military, our first leadership rank level. Okay. And it's 4 or 5 rank levels earlier. So I kept thinking that, and I said, oh, well, maybe I could make a podcast about this. This is great. And even then, I still didn't even know if that was a plausible thing to do. So in the ELP program, what you have to do is you write a paper, and then you have to write what's called an associated knowledge product. So most people draft up an infographic. It's a pretty picture with the results of all your research and whatnot. And again, that's great, but I wanted to do something different. So I said, you know what? I'm going to make a 3-part miniseries podcast to meet the project requirements, and then see if I even can make a podcast that doesn't sound, too bad. So sure enough, I made that. It worked very well. I got great reviews. Next thing you know, bingo, bango, bongo, Trench Leadership, a podcast from the front was created. And the idea is, and I apologize, this has been a long-winded type way to get there.
Okay.
The whole point of Trench Leadership is to help emerging leaders be the very best that they want to be by providing them inspiration, advice, and practical tools to actually do the day-to-day requirements of being a leader, and kind of a little bit of a broad perspective some systems thinking type of holistic overviews of other things to understand that right now you're a brand new leader. This is how we can help you fix the challenges you're seeing right now. But very soon you're going to move up in that whatever your particular chain of command is. And we're going to be there to give you the tools so you're ready when you step into that. That's the whole premise of the podcast.
Okay. I think you're going to have a lot of unique perspectives because of where you're coming from. So I think it's a great idea for you to be putting that together.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I went to the website. I liked little cartoony look of the soldiers and
fantastic. Yeah. I stumbled across that and I was like, oh, this is great. I love this. Right. And yeah, it's good. And it launches this coming Monday. So Monday, July 12th. And I've got 4 trailers and episode 00 out right now. Episode 00 talks about, why I got into this podcast and how it can help emerging leaders move forward.
It's trenchleadership.ca. So
that's correct.
Leadership.ca, and we'll put a link underneath the podcast, the YouTube, and on your page that we're going to make. So it will have it all over the place for you.
Oh, I would really appreciate that. Thanks so much. Let's get that word out there.
Of course. Well, thank you, Simon. Again, this has been a Dweebs Global production where you can go for free mentorship help, completely free, completely confidential. It's dweebsglobal.org. So thanks again, Simon, and I'll be on again next week.
Great. Thanks a lot. Take care.